Hi, I'm Maggie. Welcome to Experiments in Crafting. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make the granny spike stitch. The granny spike stitch works up a really nice dense fabric that has beautiful drape. It works really well for baby blankets or all sorts of different household projects, and it would also work really well for scarves and headbands and fingerless gloves. I'm going to be showing you just how to work the stitch up, and then you can use it in whatever application that you like. This stitch works really well with color changing yarns. You can see here I have a color change, but the stripes on the whole blend really well. And so you don't really see where the stitches change because the spiked nature of the stitch sort of blends the stripes together. I've been working up a baby blanket using Bernat Softy Baby stripes and a G or 4mm hook. For this stitch, you can use any yarn and any appropriately sized hook for that yarn. It just really depends on what the project is that you're working on. For this baby blanket, the hook that the yarn recommended works perfectly. For this stitch pattern, you're going to need to chain a multiple of 4 plus 2. For the baby blanket that I showed earlier, I chained 122. This gave me about a 30-inch wide project. For this tutorial, I'm going to chain 22, just to show you how this stitch pattern works. To begin, I'm going to make a slip knot and chain 22. If you find that your chains are too tight, you can go up a hook size for your chain row and then switch back to the smaller hook when you work the rest of your stitches. For the next row, we're going to be single crocheting into each chain in the row. Turn your row, skip the first chain closest to your hook, and begin single crocheting into the second chain. This will give you 21 single crochets across. Okay, and there are my 21 single crochets. For the next row, we need to put 2 double crochets into the top of the first single crochet. You have 2 choices when you do this. You can chain 2, turn your project, and then double crochet into the first stitch. This has your chains acting as a stitch and your stitch acting as a stitch, so that counts as your 2 double crochets. Or, my preferred method is to do a standing double crochet, where you pull up a loop the size of a double crochet, turn your project, then you take your hook, drop it around, and bring it around the back side, yarn over, bring the loop to the front, yarn over, and pull through both loops on the hook. This gives you sort of a fake starting double crochet. It also makes it so that the project doesn't loop on the side and gives you nice clean edges. It's really up to you which method you prefer. The end result is that you just need 2 double crochets in this first stitch. So I'm going to make my second double crochet, and now I have my 2 double crochets. For the rest of this tutorial, I will be using standing double crochets on the edges instead of chains. But you could, again, use whichever method you prefer. The next step is to skip 1 stitch and double crochet 3 into the next stitch. Then you should chain 1, skip 3 stitches, and double crochet into the 4th stitch. Chain 1, skip 3 stitches, and double crochet into the next stitch. You're going to just repeat this all the way down the row. Chain 1, skip 3, double crochet into the next available stitch. Chain 1, skip 3, and double crochet into the next stitch. 3 double crochets into the next stitch. Alright, when you have just 2 stitches left, skip 1 stitch and work your last 2 double crochets into the edge stitch. This will mirror the beginning of this row. To begin the next row, we're going to double crochet 2 into the first stitch in the row. And again, I'm going to be working with standing double crochets. You can also chain. Work 1 double crochet into the top there. There's my 2 double crochets. I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to skip over this whole double crochet cluster here. So all 3 of these double crochets. I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into this space, not into the chain. Make 1 double crochet. Then for my next stitch, this is a little bit weird, but you're going to yarn over, and instead of inserting your hook into the space or into a stitch up here, we're going to insert it into the middle stitch from the very first row of single crochet. So I'm going to go all the way down here, insert my hook, drop a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, and draw through 2. And this is the spike stitch that really makes this stitch look really cool. And it's also what closes up all of the holes so that you have a really nice dense fabric. The last stitch is a little bit tricky. I'm going to yarn over, and you have to find that chain space again. So just kind of pull this apart and find the little hole here and stick your hook into that space. So this gives you a 3 double crochet cluster, just like from the last row, except that one of them is worked into the single crochet row instead of the last row. So I'm going to show you that again. Chain 1, skip the double crochet cluster, yarn over, insert your hook into the chain space, make your double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook into the middle single crochet, drop a loop, complete your double crochet, and then do 1 more double crochet into that chain space. And you can see this fabric is starting to take shape, and the spike stitches are really closing up all of the holes. And you just repeat this all the way down the row. Skip the double crochet 3 from the last row. 1 double crochet. 1 into the middle stitch from the single crochet row. And another 1 into the chain space. Chain 1. And there's another 1. And then we're to our last section here. So I'm going to chain 1 and work 2 stitches into the top of the very last stitch in the row. If you're doing chains, this will be into the top of a chain 2 from the last row. If you're doing standing double crochets, it'll be into the top of a standing double crochet. Okay. And that's the end of the second row of granny spike stitches. To make the next row a little bit easier, I'm going to refer to this row of clusters, the first one that we worked, as the first row, and the row that we just worked with the spike stitches as row 2. So to start row 3, we're going to, again, start with 2 double crochets into the first stitch, and I'm working my standing double crochet and then 1 double crochet into the stitch. Then I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the chain space from row 2, make a double crochet, and then I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into the middle of the first cluster of 3 double crochets from row 1. And make the spike stitch. And then I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into this gap that's still the chain space from row 2. Just kind of got squished down with that spike stitch. Okay. Chain 1, skip over the cluster from row 2, yarn over, and make your double crochet into the chain space from row 2. Then again, we're going to work into the middle stitch from the next cluster on row 1. So just insert your hook into the top of that stitch, make your double crochet, and then your third double crochet goes into the chain space from row 2. And you can see that these stitches are really starting to squish down, and they really fill up all of the gaps that crochet generally has. So chain 1, we're working in the next chain space from row 2, then into the center stitch on the cluster from row 1, and then again into that chain space from row 2. Chain 1, skip the cluster in row 2, double crochet 1 into the chain space, double crochet 1 into the center stitch from row 1, and then double crochet into the chain space from row 2 again. Chain 1, one more time, double crochet into the chain space from row 2, double crochet into the center of the center stitch of the cluster from row 1, double crochet into the chain space from row 2, and we've reached the end of our row, and so we are going to put 2 double crochets into the last stitch. And again, that could be a standing double crochet, or it could be the top of a chain 2. Depends on how you start your rows. Okay. And so there you can see that we're working up a really nice dense fabric. And I'm ready to start the next row. The next row is just a repeat of row 2. That's really all there is to this stitch. You just keep repeating rows 2 and 3 until you've reached whatever size project you're going to be making. There is one other thing to note though. You can see here that the tops of the rows all have gaps, and I'm going to show you how to close those up when you want to finish your project off. We're going to assume that I'm at the end of my project and I'm ready to close up these holes. To do this, I'm going to chain 1, turn my project, and single crochet into the tops of the 2 double crochets at the end of the row. Then I'm going to single crochet into the tops of each of the double crochets in this cluster. I've reached the first chain space in my row, and instead of single crocheting into it, I'm going to double crochet into the middle of the cluster from the row below. This closes up the stitch without adding any more stitches to the row. I'm then going to move on and single crochet into the tops of each of the double crochets in the next cluster. And I'm going to keep going across the row just like that. Single crocheting into each double crochet and double crocheting across the hole into the lower row to close up any of the chain spaces. It doesn't really matter which repeat you end on, whether it's a repeat of row 2 or a repeat of row 3. You can just modify this so that you're single crocheting into the tops of any double crochets and double crocheting across any holes. I'm just going to work this all the way down the row. And that's really all there is to the granny spike stitch. If you find that you're having any trouble, let me know in the comment section below and I will do whatever I can to help you out. If you end up making anything with this stitch, please feel free to share it with me on Facebook or on Instagram at Experiments in Crafting. If you like this tutorial and you'd like to see more, please hit subscribe. Thanks for watching.